India now has 28 states and 8 union territories. But that was not the case when the country became independent in 1947. Over 75 years, the Indian map has undergone several changes. States have been reorganized in multiple phases and there were different factors behind it. So, let's take a look at how these states were formed. As early as the 1930s, the Indian National Congress had mooted the idea that independent India would be a union of states. Sardar Vallabbhai Patel and his Secretary V.P. Menon of the States Department got to work. Their task was to integrate over 550 princely states into India. While a majority of the provinces and native Indian states had acceded to India, before August 1947, some resisted. The princely state of Hyderabad under Nizam Mir Osman Ali Khan even fancied its chances of being an independent country. But it eventually surrendered in September 1948 after Indian troops intervened and it joined the Indian Union.
The Nizam of Hyderabad personally received Sardar Patel, who had come to accept the accession of the state to India.
For months, Kashmir contemplated whether to join India or Pakistan. But after facing pressure and military action from Pakistan, Kashmir's Raja Hari Singh asked India for help and later signed the Instrument of Accession on October 26, 1947. As per the first schedule of the Constitution in 1949, integrated territories were grouped into 27 states divided into these categories. Part A states were erstwhile governors as provinces. Part B were former princely states or clusters of princely states. Part C were states run by commissioners appointed by the President. Part D comprised solely of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, then run by a centre-appointed Lieutenant Governor. By 1950, states were grouped based on forms of governance. But people wanted change and thus the demand to redraw the map based on linguistic basis grew stronger. After much pressure, the government eventually agreed and in 1953, Telugu-speaking people had their own state, Andhra Pradesh. Carved out of Madras, it was India's first linguistic state. Following this, the States Reorganization Commission was formed by the government in 1953. The government created 14 states and 6 union territories under the States Reorganization Act passed in 1956. In 1956, the map of Bombay was redrawn to include Marathi-speaking as well as Gujarati-speaking regions. This led to separate agitations and on May 1, 1960, through the Bombay Reorganization Act, Maharashtra and Gujarat were created.
Bhavan, a map of Maharashtra is unveiled to mark the birth of the new state.
Meanwhile, in Punjab, there were demands for a separate state for the Punjabi-speaking people, excluding the Hindi-speaking areas. The Punjabi Suba movement, led by Akali Dal, gained momentum and in 1966, Punjab was created for Sikhs and Punjabi speakers and Haryana for Hindi speakers. The hilly areas were carved out to form Himachal Pradesh. In 1956, only the state of Assam was created in the northeast. However, the long-standing demands of Nagas and Mizos for separate states were not accepted. The tribal population felt undermined and it led to militancy and calls for breaking away from the union. Eventually, 6 other northeastern states were formed, starting with Nagaland in 1963, Meghalaya, Manipur and Tripura in 1972, Sikkim in 1975, and Arunachal Pradesh in 1982. At the turn of the millennium in 2000, 3 states, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Uttarakhand were carved out of Bihar, Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh respectively. Underdevelopment and cultural differences were some of the reasons why these states were carved out. The last state to be formed was Telangana. In fact, the demand for its statehood had begun as early as 1956. The movement was rekindled decades later by K. Chandrasekhar Rao, the present Chief Minister of Telangana, who formed the Telangana Rashtra Samiti in the new millennium. The state was eventually formed out of Andhra Pradesh in 2014, with Hyderabad as the common capital for 10 years. The most recent redrawing of the map took place in 2019 with the revocation of Jammu and Kashmir's special status and the creation of the Union Territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. The government's rationale for the removal of Article 370 and 35A was to fuel economic prosperity, create employment and reduce militancy in Kashmir.
तो मैं मानता हूं कि जम्मू कश्मीर में एक लंबे रक्तपात भरे युग का अंत धारा 370 के समाप्त होने से बनेगा।